destroy the earth. And Adonai said, "This is the sign of the covenant I am making between me and you, and every living creature with you, a covenant for all generations to come. I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and you." Now this covenant is what's called a royal grant covenant. Some of you may be familiar with these terms we've gone over in the past. The royal grant covenant is a king's grant to a loyal servant for faithful or exceptional service. And it was normally perpetual and almost always unconditional. But the loyal servant's heirs benefited from it only as they continued their father's loyalty and service. Okay? That should actually say in their father's loyalty and service. Unconditional. The sign was the bow, the rainbow, the Hebrew word keshet. I have to apologize, guys. I inserted some slides into the program, and they didn't come out here. But the Hebrew word for rainbow, keshet, is derived from an actual bow. Hence the shape, and that's why they called it the keshet. It was a hunter's bow, and actually it's the same Hebrew word for a bowman, or one who was hunting with a bow. So it's an interesting aside. As we read in Genesis 6:9, Noah walked with God, remember? He was made whole, not blameless or perfect. He was made sound through his walking. So what exactly was Noah's new way of walking? He was told to be fruitful and multiply. Just like Adam and Chava, remember in the garden. Because of course this was more necessary than ever now that the entire creation had been wiped away. Be fruitful and multiply. The second was that, if you remember, Adam and Chava in the garden were told only to eat things from seed-bearing plants, correct? Now, food will include meat as well. Three, and this is also recited in Acts chapter 15. If you remember in the council there, the Jerusalem council, when they were trying to figure out what to do with Gentiles, should they be circumcised or not? They said, at the very least, they should abstain from meat that is sacrificed to idols and meat that is strangled. Well, meat that is strangled has the life and the blood in it. So this goes all the way back to the time of Noah. And of course, they were told, do not murder. Traditionally speaking, one of the things that was taking place at the time before the flood was a great deal of murder. In fact, the word Hamas in the Hebrew, from where we get the modern Arabic acronym of Hamas, means violence. It means to do violence. This was exactly what was taking place in the land before the people were destroyed by the flood. These four new regulations form the basis for what we know as today as the Noahide laws, something that we're going to be talking about a little bit more in depth in the next class. The descendants of Noah continue to spread and multiply, and as we see in Genesis 10:21, we are introduced to Shem. Shem is the Hebrew word for name. In fact, where the term anti-Semite is really anti-Shemite, those who are against the descendants of Shem, the descendants of the name. Shem's grandson was Ever, which means the region beyond, and from Ever we get the word for Hebrew, which is Ivri. Some people call Ever the first Hebrew, but biblically becomes the great-great-great-great-grandfather of the first Hebrew, Avram Ha'ivri, in Genesis 14:13, which was Abram the Hebrew. And it's really here that we begin to see a schism take place, a separation, where one people are now broken up into two groups of people. Adonai has decided to set a specific people aside for himself. He calls Abraham, Lech lecha, get yourself out from your land.
I know this is going back a bit. If you were asked what Christos actually means. In standard Greek, it means smudged with oil.
Smudged with oil. So there is a type of an anointing, I would suppose.
But the reason they didn't have the equivalent word is in Greek culture you don't pour oil on the heads of your leaders.
Thank you for that. So here we begin to see a separation. Remember, he says, Lech lecha, get yourself out. And the whole earth used the same language and the same words. And from that, you remember the Tower of Babel, the people are scattered. Of course, this was before the time of Avram. And all of a sudden, there were many languages, not just one. And from that came Avram, who was exalted father, who would eventually become Abraham, father of the multitude. Abraham would marry Sarai, which means princess, and she would become eventually Sarah, which is noblewoman. The call of Abraham came not long after the scattering of one people, and it's really here that Adonai creates a shift in the Torah. And it goes from an account of humankind, of humanity, to an account of a single called-out people, beginning, of course, with Avram Ha'ivri, Abram the Hebrew. This is the third time that Adonai has attempted to direct his creation towards righteousness. The other two times, of course, were Adam and Eve in the garden. He had a walk for them. He had a call for righteousness with Adam and Chava. They failed and they sinned. Okay? Noah was the second one, and there was a certain halakha for Noah. Okay, now Avram and Sarai, are now, there's a split that is taking place here. And the focus is upon a single called out people. So why was Avram chosen? The scriptures don't really tell us, actually, exactly why he was chosen. But, of course, the rabbis have questioned this for centuries and came up with an idea, which I always think is very interesting. It's great history. Again, in the traditions of the fathers, it's believed that Avram endured 10 trials. And, of course, these are very embellished. And I don't take them all very seriously, but many of them, of course, are biblical. Nimrod sought to kill Abraham for smashing his father's idols. And as a result of that, Abraham hid for 13 years. And there's a neat story here that I'd like to read to you as a result of that first one, because there really is a tremendous midrash interpretation built upon this. Abraham's father, Terach, he was an idol manufacturer, okay, according to tradition. Once he had to travel, so he left Abraham to manage the shop, the idol shop. People would come in and ask to buy idols, but Abraham would say, "How old are you?" And the person would say, "Oh, 50 or 60. Abraham would say, "Isn't it pathetic that a man of 60 wants to bow down to an idol that is a day old and made this morning?" The man would feel ashamed and then leave without purchasing an idol. One time a woman came with a basket of bread and she asked Abraham, "Take this and offer it to the gods." Abraham got up with a hammer in his hand and broke all the idols to pieces. and then put the hammer in the hand of the biggest idol in the shop. When his father came back and saw the broken idols, he was appalled and said, "Who did this?" "How can I hide anything from you?" replied Avram calmly. "A woman came with a basket of bread and told me to offer it to them. I brought it in front of them, and each one said, 'I'm going to eat first.' Then the biggest one got up and took the hammer and broke all the little ones to pieces." "What are you trying to pull on me?" his father Terah asked. "Do they have minds?" Said Abraham, "Listen to what your own mouth is saying. They have no power at all, so why would you worship idols?" And as a result of this, Abraham's father went to Nimrod, and Abraham had to hide for some 13 years. And he wouldn't bow down to idols, and tradition has it that he was cast into a fiery furnace by Nimrod. Very interesting stories behind all this. They also believe, according to many of these traditions, that the skins that were given to Adam and Eve after they sinned found their way into the hands of Noah. Okay? And they were given to Nimrod as a gift by Noah. And that is why he became such a master hunter of animals. If you remember in Genesis, it says that he was a master hunter because the animals would submit themselves to him. It was believed that there was a mystical power behind these garments. Of course, these are all, not really to be taken seriously. In fact, they're not biblical at all, but nonetheless, some very interesting stories. So Abram supposedly spent time with Lot as well in the fiery furnace. Adonai delivered them from that. Then Adonai commanded Abram to leave his homeland and family, left Makkah that we talked about. That is definitely biblical. After arriving in Canaan, Abraham had to endure famine. We know that. You remember with Sarai, he went to Egypt. And the whole Abimelech and everything that took place. Sarah was kidnapped and brought to Pharaoh. In fact, Abimelech was it was a different section here. Something similar also happened with Pharaoh here. Biblical, of course. Lot was taken captive. Biblical. Adonai showed Abram that his descendants would suffer. That was also biblical. Adonai commanded Abram to circumcise himself and Ishmael. Adonai commanded Abram to drive away Ishmael and Hagar. And then, of course, the ultimate, which is considered the Akedah, which is the binding of Isaac. Adonai commands Abraham to bind his son and to offer him up as a sacrifice. The reason I share this with you is that it's traditionally believed that this is one of the main reasons why Abraham was chosen, because of his righteousness, okay? Because of things that he accomplished on behalf of God early on in Ur of the Kasdim. I thought that idol story was very interesting. I learned it years ago, and it always brings a chuckle out of me. So, even though we don't know exactly why Abraham was chosen, he was chosen for a specific purpose, right? For I have chosen him, so that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of Adonai by doing righteousness and justice, so that Adonai may bring upon Abraham what he has spoken about him. So we see that we are chosen to walk. We are chosen for halakha, that we may do the things of God, that we may do the will of God. It's really from this part here, chosen word, which is really the Hebrew word yada, meaning to know, to perceive, a known people, a perceived people. It's from this verse where the term chosen people is derived. You've heard of the Jewish people as the chosen people? Well, they are indeed the known people. They have been perceived by God himself.